What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Bull Combo. Hope you're doing great. Hope you're having a great day. I'm getting back to some of the core fundamentals of this channel. We'll be talking about some music. So stick around while I talk about my top 5 most anticipated metal hardcore albums of 2021. 2020 was a really awesome year for music. It was a really tough year for people, but all things considered, the music that came out in 2020 was pretty awesome. There were some really solid album releases. 2021, on the other hand, has been a little murky so far. There's really not a lot of information on the albums we can expect this year. Things have only been announced a few months out, so while this list is the most up-to-date list I could find of the albums I'm looking forward to based on bands I enjoy, there probably are a lot more bands that anticipate releasing albums or music this year, and they just haven't said anything due to the unique circumstances. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So number 5 on the list is Architect's album, For Those That Wish to Exist. This should be dropping in February, and it's going to be the direct follow-up to their release Holy Hell. Holy Hell was an excellent album. It showed them returning to the strong writing patterns and strong song structure that made their album All Our Gods Have Abandoned Us so successful. If it's not broke, don't fix it. That seems to be the mentality Architects has been taking to their most recent releases. I do think that it's sort of interesting that the lead single from this album, Animals, does have a slightly more industrial influence to it. It'd be interesting to see if the rest of the album reflects that as well, or if that was just the style they were going for in this song. There is a noticeable industrial influence in the music that they've released with this new album, so I'm curious to see if this is just a slight change for the single, or if they're going to be changing some of their writing style and structure just a little bit for this album. All in all, Architects is one of the heavy hitters in the scene. Every single one of their albums is solid. I have no doubt that this album is going to be solid as well, and if we can get to shows this year, I'd love to catch an Architects show. It's been over a year since I've been to any show, and I'm really just itching to get out there, get around people, get into a pit, and rock out to some crazy breakdowns. Alright guys, so number 4 is You're Welcome, the latest album by A Day to Remember. This album has had a little bit of controversy surrounding it since it was supposed to be released about a year ago, and it was pushed back several times. The band basically stated that they were taking the time to work on the songs and make them as good as they possibly could be. They probably picked the right year to do it. 2020 was a really down year. Bands weren't able to tour on their albums, so that might have been a determining factor in why they decided to push the album back. Regardless, it does look like the album is now going to be dropping in March, and it doesn't look like it's going to be pushed back anymore, based off the fact they've been releasing some singles over the last few months. I think they've released 4 or 5 singles so far, and every single one of them have been really different. From the hard-hitting Resentment, to the super catchy chorus of Degenerates, to the feel-good vibe of Everything We Need. I really think that this album is going to have a lot of diversity on it. It's really going to check all the boxes that we would look for in a solid album. I'm curious to see if they take a softer approach to this. I know their last album, Bad Vibrations, saw the band take on a decidedly heavier vibe. I think the heavier sound has always served A Day to Remember well. So I'm curious to see exactly what they do. Let's be honest, A Day to Remember can write a slammin' metalcore song, and they can write an amazing acoustic ballad. So I don't think we're going to be disappointed either way. I'm really just curious to see the direction the album takes. Right now it sounds like they're trying to go as diverse as possible, but I do hope there's some heavy hitters on there because I do definitely love me some heavy A Day to Remember songs. So we'll keep an eye on that. You're Welcome looks like it's coming out in March, so it's probably going to be the second album released on this list. And I think it'll be a great way to ring in new music for 2021. Era has announced that they'll be releasing their self-titled album this year on UNFD Records. Their previous album, Neon, was an awesome album to me. Era is one of those bands that have stayed really consistent through all of their releases. They have a really tried and true writing style that I think is very accessible and really entertaining. Technical riffs overlaid with intricate lead lines have really seen Era take on a more sonic sound in their recent albums, and it sounds like this album's going to be no exception. Their latest singles, Snowblood, House of Glass, and Divisionary, can tell us anything. It sounds like the band is sticking to their roots, and things are going to be nice and heavy on this album. I'm really excited. These guys have always been riff masters. They write some just beautiful sounding riffs, things that are really easy listening, especially inside of the metal hardcore scene. To have something that's considered easy listening is no small feat. So I'm really curious to see what Era does on this album, if they decide to branch out, bring a little more creativity and diversity into this, or if they stick to the formula that's been tried and true for them. So far, it sounds like they're sticking to that formula, but things can change just because these singles have been released. Doesn't mean that they're not doing this just to show people the familiar side of the band before releasing some new stuff. If I had to guess, I'd say they're probably going to stay on the heavier side. Either way, these songs sound sick. Snowblood has such an epic riff line to it. I'm just so excited to hear the rest of this album, and I have a feeling that this whole thing is going to slam. Number 2 on this list is Timeless, the new EP by Of Mice and Men. Of Mice and Men has been hit or miss the last few years. Since the departure of unclean vocalist Austin Carlisle, they've taken on a decidedly more mature sound, slightly softer sound, but still retaining that heavy tone that made Of Mice and Men of Mice and Men. 2021 saw two big changes already for the band, one in their signing to Sharp Tone Records, and two in the release of their latest single, Obsolete. I'm really interested to see what Of Mice and Men does on Sharp Tone Records. Sharp Tone had an incredible 2020. The albums that were released last year were just solid all across the board. They must have had at least 5 or 6 albums that just hit and were absolutely great. I think Sharp Tone was Record Label of the Year last year in terms of heavier music in the metal hardcore scene. They have a habit of helping bands revive their career, revitalize their sound. I'm really curious to see what happens with the Mice and Men now that they're on this label. I have a feeling that this may move them in the right direction and kind of bring them back to the top of the scene. At one point, Of Mice and Men were some of the biggest heavy hitters in the metal hardcore scene. They were playing arena shows, sold out shows, and supporting huge bands. And in more recent years, the fanfare and excitement has died off just a tad. I think it would be really cool to see them return to form a little bit with this album. I know it's not quite possible to return to their original form since Austin Carlisle isn't there anymore. But even since his departure, they've written some really solid material, so I definitely think it's possible for them to write an album that really recaptures that magic that made Of Mice and Men so popular. Alright guys, so my number one album I'm super looking forward to in 2021 is the latest album by Ice9 Kills. We don't even know what this album is going to be called. All we know is that Spencer Charnas confirmed that they are working on a new album that should be released this year. Their 2018 release, The Silver Scream, was nothing short of a masterpiece. I think for many music fans, they would have been completely fine with these songs being included in the actual movies that they were about. I think classic movie fans would have been okay with those songs being used as the soundtrack in these movies. That is how good these songs were. Their previous album was themed around books, and their most recent album was themed around horror movies. So I'm curious to see what type of theme they take on in this album. Ice9 Kills seems to be a band that excels when it comes to writing themed music. Since their most recent 2 albums, it really seems like the band has kind of exploded in popularity and taken their songwriting to just another level completely. So Ice9 Kills' 2021 release is definitely the most anticipated album for me as of right now. Again, that might change, but the Ink Boys never disappoint. They slay, their live performance is incredible, and I just can't wait to see what they come up with this year. 2021 could in fact be a really good year for music. Again guys, we don't really know what's happening. A lot of bands and artists have been quieter than usual and a little more hush-hush on their plans for the year. Some of them, I imagine, are probably taking a wait-and-see approach to see exactly how the year is going to shake out. Some bands might even hold off on releases until they can tour those releases, because touring a release does really aid in the popularity and long-term longevity of an album. It doesn't seem like it would, but being able to play shows to that album is extremely important in getting people to connect with the music and really be able to live those songs. So I have a feeling that we may see a downtick in albums released in 2021. In 2020, there was a lot of albums that came out because people didn't know what was going on, and they got to a point where they just decided to put the music out. I think in 2021, we have a little clearer view and a little clearer sense of exactly the direction that the scene's going, and really that our country's going. So I think now that bands have a stronger idea of what to expect this year, we're probably going to see more decisive action by them. It's going to be a conscious decision whether or not they want to release music this year, knowing that they can't tour to it. And again, I think because of that, it may deter some bands from releasing albums this year, so we may see a slight downtick in the number of releases. Either way, this list gets me super excited. I'm always excited for new music. I'm really curious to know what albums you guys are looking forward to. It doesn't have to be a metal or hardcore album. If you have a specific genre or album that you're looking forward to, let me know down below. I'd love to hear it in the comments. As always, guys, I appreciate you checking out this video, and I appreciate the support. I hope you guys have a great day, and until next time, we'll see you soon.